I'm Mara. Thanks for joining me. Today we're going to be talking about trauma and how to heal ourselves from that trauma. It's very important that we acknowledge that we've all experienced trauma. So I want you to repeat after me. I have experienced trauma. I have experienced trauma. Yes, you, I, everyone has experienced trauma. We think of trauma as something severe that would have happened, so whether it's sexual, emotional or physical abuse or neglect, during childhood, but actually much more than that, than just trauma. And this is why I've decided to do this video outside, because it's important that we reconnect back to our roots, to nature, in order to heal, because this is where we're from. And by delving deep and knowing our emotions, which is where the truth lies, we can start healing, and that's just by knowing our trauma. Okay, so the definition of trauma is an experienced event that has caused physical harm, neurosis and distress. And just that statement alone, I think we can see how we can all relate to some sort of trauma. I have put traumas in different categories, and here are the categories. So childhood trauma, later life trauma, so that's adults and adolescent trauma, pregnancy, so trauma that happens during pregnancy. There's ancestral trauma, which is also epigenetics, secondhand trauma and collective trauma together. Okay, so in a second you're going to see a list of examples, and these are just examples, only a few examples of childhood trauma, and I'd like you to identify at least one of these traumas for you, because I bet you there'd be at least one that you could relate to. Okay, so neglect, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, that's trauma. But also being away as a baby, away from your mother, that's a traumatic event. All babies need to be with their mothers, that's why they cry. If they're away from their mother, they cry. If they're aware of it, they cry. Lack of bonding activity, so that's not co-sleeping, skin to skin, breastfeeding, that is a type of trauma as well. Being put down by your caregivers, so whether that's in words being put down or just implied that maybe you're not good enough, that's a type of trauma. Being punished, so being put on a naughty step, just being called naughty is a trauma. Being understood by your caregivers, not being known, not being heard by your caregivers is a type of trauma. Lack of freedom to express and be who you want, to express what you want, that's trauma. Increased pressure from your caregivers, being put in this box, having to conform, and also parental separation. But again, there's many more as well. Okay, now there's going to be a list of adults, adolescents, and later life trauma, and these are again just examples of some of the traumas. So sexual assault, so your perception of what sexual assault has been for you, that's traumatic for you, so that's going to have an effect on you. Bullying, so any kind of verbal abuse, an accident that might have happened, that might have caused physical harm but also psychological harm. Financial problems, financial difficulties in your life, a loss of a home, loss of a person in your life, separation from a loved one, from your family, a family event or family drama that might have caused an effect as well for you. Okay, now here's a list of examples of traumatic events during pregnancy. Now these are only a few, because the studies in pregnancy are not as many as you find for later in life. It's a bit more difficult to study, but these are a few examples. So the stress that a mother endures during pregnancy would have an effect on their baby, have an effect on the womb. And then later on, the child is more likely to experience anxiety and depression and any other behavioural issues from that as well. Any kind of birth complications would have an effect on the child's health. Something that's not talked about enough is epigenetics, so anything that you consume would have an effect on the baby. So lack of nutrition would mean a lack of nutrition for the baby, so that's why we need to be careful what we're eating, and we're eating the right things so we're healthy during pregnancy and before that as well, for ourselves and also for our baby. So we've given some examples of some trauma. So I've mentioned epigenetics is another type of trauma, which is the same as ancestral trauma. So an event, or anything that would have happened in your family history that would have an effect on you. So maybe there was sexual abuse that you don't know of, and that might be coming up in your life now. And it's about investigating your behaviours and understanding why you might be feeling a certain way, and it might have to do with a history, and it definitely would to some degree. Then there's second-hand trauma, or some people call past life trauma, and collective trauma as well. So that's anything that would anything around you would have an effect. So whether in this world at the moment, the energies that are going on would have an effect on your energy, in a place that you're living in. Maybe there's a particular event that happens there, and that would have an effect on you, and that's a collective trauma. Okay, so now I'm going to be talking about my trauma story. I think it's important to explain what trauma is in this way, so maybe it might help you understand how you can relate your traumas to yourself, and from there how you can heal. So my trauma story started from my mother, who had me, and while she was pregnant with me, she lost her husband, my father. He was actually killed, so it was a highly traumatic event for her. So because of that, she had lots of birth complications because of the stress that she endured. And then after that, of course, because of the loss of her partner, she was highly stressed, distressed, highly depressed, and she couldn't take care of me the way that she wanted to. So I was left in a room as a baby. I wasn't, doing the bonding activities that we should as a baby with our mothers. And then from that, later on in my life, a lot of things built up in terms of how I felt that she didn't understand me and didn't know me, and a lot of controlling behaviours that I perceived that she was doing towards me. So for many years, my and my mum's relationship was very, very rocky. I then became pregnant, and because of what happened with my mother, which I'll explain afterwards, I had prenatal depression and I had postnatal depression. While I was depressed, even though I was doing all those bonding activities, I was breastfeeding, I was doing skin to skin, I was with my child 90% of the time, and of course had a very supportive partner, but nevertheless, I was still very depressed. And even when I was breastfeeding, I'd be crying and wishing that I wasn't here, that I wanted to just throw myself out the window, because I was in a very dark place. And it was only so when I had to move back with my parents, so they could help me with my child, because I didn't have any family around at the time apart from my partner, and it was only after my child turned 2 that I started to have a better relationship with her. And that's because my and my mum's relationship started to heal. We started to work on things together. The more we worked on things, me and my mum, and more we understood each other, the better relationship we had, then the better relationship I had with my child. So I had to reconnect to that motherly energy again, for me to connect to my child, and that's what happened. And that's a snapshot, a very small part of my trauma story. There's obviously much more to it than that, but basically it started from trauma that my mum experienced, that affected me, and then from that I was affected, and my child was affected, because of the stress that she experienced, because I was stressed, I was depressed during pregnancy and after that as well, and I had to connect back with my mother, for me to connect with my own motherly energy, so I can be the mother that I wanted for my child. And now we have this wonderful relationship, me and my mum, and me and my child as well. And that's just all come down to healing. And that's the thing with these things, is that you can absolutely heal, you can absolutely change, but we all have to start from the darkest place. It's the darkest place, it's the emotions where the truth lies, but it's also the most difficult one. But it's where we have to start in order to truly heal. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that video, and there'll be more videos coming up as well, and I'll speak to you soon.